Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. This is City Talk. The proposed West Side Stadium for the New York Jets has been called both, quote, a glittering new playground for the rich on the banks of the Hudson, or, quote, a revolutionary facility, a first-class sports facility in the world's greatest city. The West Side Stadium, along with the proposed arena for the Jets in Brooklyn and new homes for the Yankees and Mets, are part of a Stadia Mania sweeping the city. In the first installment of a multi-show examination of Stadia Mania, I spoke with Jay Cross, president of the New York Jets. Now the critics have their say. Joining me are Neil Sullivan, a professor of public affairs at Baruch College and author of several books on baseball and stadia, the most recent, A Diamond in the Bronx, and Joe Restuccia, the executive director of the Clinton Housing Development Company, on the board of directors of the Hell's Kitchen Hudson Alliance, and a member of Community Board 4. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have you.
Good to see you.
Let's just set the frame here. You've got a $1.4 billion, 75,000 seat stadium south of 34th Street and 12th Avenue on a platform over the MTA rail yards. On March 25th, the mayor and the governor get together, hold a huge press conference, and release this $4.6 billion plan. Your reaction?
I think at times there's two great stories related to this issue you can read about in the paper regularly. There's this great excitement, the mayor saying, oh, if you're not happy today, when are you going to be happy, blah, 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 we're going to have this wonderful thing. Then you can pick up the same paper, look at the same page, and read about the security threats that the public's under. The stadiums are built for the purpose of attracting tens of thousands, maybe over 100,000 people to some event, an event to be watched by millions of people all over the world. Great cultural significance, all kinds of attention paid to it. And at the same time, the developers and the public officials who cooperate with this expect the public to put hundreds of millions of dollars into this venture, primarily for the benefit of rich private parties, at the very point the public isn't safe. So if you're going to have the Olympics here, if you're going to get the Super Bowl, you're going to have all these things, you may very well want to do that. But you have to ask some very good, very tough questions about what part of this development the private sector should pick up and what part the public sector should pick up. At the moment, this is totally out of balance.
Okay. But you're adding a new dimension to the normal critique of stadia, and that is they're not worth the public input. They cost more. The jobs don't materialize. You're bringing in a post-9/11 consideration, and that's security.
Yeah, I didn't bring it in. I'm just pointing it out. Al-Qaeda brought it in.
Discussion. Okay.
I'm just saying it was always, I've been writing about this for about 20 years, it was always foolish to spend public money subsidizing some of the wealthiest, most privileged people in America who own these teams. Now it's beyond foolish. It's wake up at what the urgent public needs are of any major community and address those needs.
Okay. Jay Cross last week said that it was obviously good for the Jets, it was good for the city, it was good for the neighborhood, and it's good for the fans. Joe, talk about the neighborhood. Talk about the area that is going to be redeveloped, what it's like now, what it could be under this plan, and what it could be on other plans. What do you object?
What do I object? It's a 59 square block area. It's a big chunk of Midtown Manhattan. It's the West 30s, really, from 30th Street up to 42nd Street. North of that is the heavy residential portion of Clinton from 42nd to 59th Street. There's tens of thousands of people that live there. One of the most disturbing things about this is a discussion that it's an empty spot. It's a blank slate. There's nothing there. Well, on the proposed stadium site over the rail yards, yes, it's a rail yard. It's empty. There's nothing there. But it is surrounded by tens of thousands of people, by all kinds of businesses. It's zoned manufacturing, but because it just has been sitting there for a long time, it's changed. There are photo studios. There are major distribution centers. There's all kinds of businesses that have just popped up because it's a fringe area, and that's what happens in fringe areas in New York. So the constant response, it's blank, it's empty, it's nothing, it's pretty galling after a while. But the truth is, what's going to happen in the future? When you rezone areas, they develop. Things happen. It can be a commercial district. It can be residential. It can be a combination of both. But the stadium is being billed as it's the key to make development happen. Why in Midtown Manhattan on the west side do we need something, we need a key? People are knocking at the door all the time. Just give them the tools and they'll actually make something happen.
One of the differences, just to tag onto that, differences between kinds of businesses you're talking about that are already there and the sports business.
Right.
These businesses create jobs.
Now, that's an argument that's traditionally made by the developers of arenas, stadia, and convention facilities, that there is a net economic impact, positive, permanent jobs, construction jobs, etc. In your experience, Neil, and then in your experience with this project, Joe, do these beneficent outcomes result?
There's no economist I know of who hasn't been on a developer's payroll who says that these kinds of developments do anything net in terms of job creation or economic impact. A fellow told me once, if you want to follow the manager who really has the impact on economic development in a city, in New York in particular, you'd follow the manager of Macy's, not Joe Torre, because Macy's actually generates economic growth. The Yankees, I used to get calls. What were the ripple effects of the public investment, $120, $140 million in Yankee Stadium in the early 1970s? I said, well, what happened to the South Bronx in the rest of the 1970s? It was in a free fall. There wasn't any ripple effect. Go to city more recently spent about $118 million on 2 minor league ballparks, one in Coney Island, one in Staten Island. Coney Island sells out, but I don't know anybody that's saying that that's the cause of some great economic resurgence in Brooklyn. And Staten Island, my wife and I went to a game a week before September 11th. That team was headed for the playoffs, and you could walk up, get a ticket, because the place was half empty. So
these are not good public investments.
you need to have audits, I think, and you would do this on any area other than sports or possibly some other big high-profile celebrity venture. You would do an audit. What happened before? Was our investment recouped? And you'd find over and over, I think, look at Shea Stadium. What's the ripple effect? Well, I guess if your car breaks down in the parking lot, you can have it towed to a junkyard across the street.
Right.
There's some kind of synergy there, but you don't find it in any of the stadiums.
But it's what kind of jobs. That's the issue. Yeah, there's going to be construction jobs no matter what. But if there's residential buildings built and commercial buildings built, there's going to be construction jobs too. Those are good paying jobs. But the rest of them are hot dog jobs, restaurant jobs, very low paying service sector jobs. What do we have there now? We have real New York type jobs. Photo studios that service the garment center and the fashion industry, that's New York. That's why people come to New York. A digital recording studio, again, it's our locus. It's what we do that it makes us different, not just pushing hamburgers.
Okay, let me take the Jets' position. We will generate X number of tax dollars for X public revenue, and if their projections are correct, which is always problematic, then you're going to make money. If in fact this were the case, would it be worth it to get the extra 30, 40, 50 million dollars in tax revenues to change this area? What do you really lose if you develop this site?
Their answer is $67 billion, okay, in tax revenue. That's insane.
Well, that's
just
I've missed that number.
Okay, that's just silly.
That's mind blowing.
Okay, well, what do you lose?
That's not what Jay said last week. They were talking in the $30 million a year range.
Well, it's a number on a piece of paper.
Okay.
All right. No, this is over the life of their stadium.
Go ahead.
What do you lose? You lose the ability, first of all, you have a huge waterfront site. You don't have many 3-block sites on the Hudson that can be redeveloped in a way that really is the glittering jewel of our city, not a 30-story box with a Jets name on the side, that can be accessible to New Yorkers, not to people who are season ticket holders or can afford to go to a very fancy club restaurant. That's not an opportunity, I think, in this city we should ignore. That's a major thing. You also lose the fact that over the last 20, 30 years, the entire West Side has just grown and changed and redeveloped in itself.
So what the argument might be then is if you let the market to its own devices, we may be generating more varied and more economically productive uses. Is that the
Well,
argument?
absolutely. And, you know, there's supposed to be this conservative revolution, whatever you want to call it. Certainly, you can document that the theory of welfare policy has changed significantly in America since the mid-1990s. Yet, here's Johnson & Johnson. According to, by their records, they had gross sales last year of $42 billion.
I know, I checked.
Now, they're saying, oh, we're willing to put up, what, $800 million for this thing? Thanks. 2 weeks of Band-Aid sales, and they can pay for the whole deal. So where on earth do you ask taxpayers to subsidize your enterprise?
But wait a minute, excuse me. If I'm the Jets, I'm going to ask, the question is, why would public officials answer in the affirmatively? I'm a private firm. Of course, I'm going to ask the question.
Well, then that raises a question, speaking as a native Californian, and you two can help me out with this. Where is this vaunted New York toughness? Why do you people, I will use those words.
No, wait a minute.
Why do you put up with this? Over and over and over again, you see it in baseball. There's this preposterous threat that the Yankees, they're going to move if they don't get, they're going to move where? Charlotte? New Orleans? They're not going anywhere.
And yet, not the Meadowlands.
Well, and you don't have public officials call them on this. So
we're gutless?
Yeah.
And what?
No. We're not gutless. We're in the middle of, you said, that conservative revolution, okay? But the truth is, you know, it's about money. We have a mayor who's a smart man and a smart businessman. We have a deputy mayor, Dan Doctoroff, smart man, businessman. But the truth is, they're acting as if they're doing some private business here, as opposed to working in the public realm. In New York, I lived through Times Square, I lived through Worldwide Plaza, all kinds of rezonings. It's a fractious battle back and forth. Stakeholders argue, push, you know, you change things, you yell. That's what happens here.
Not on stadium stuff.
This is very genteel, because the stadium is wrapped in the Olympic flag. And everybody in this city is so frightened of saying, oh, if I do something, we might lose the Olympics. What's going to happen? You have to be able to say there's the Olympic bid, and then there's the stadium construction. They're linked, but they're separate. It doesn't have to be here on the West Side.
Here's the ultimate thing for a New Yorker to choke on. San Francisco, 4 times, voted down public stadiums for the San Francisco Giants. The Giants had to build Pac-Bell Park, or whatever it's called this month, with private money. So they built this lovely ballpark with private money, still had enough money to keep Barry Bonds, and they put a competitive team on the field every year this park's been open. So if San Francisco can get tough, if San Francisco can call these plutocrats on this corporate welfare, where's the toughness in New York?
Well, partly it may not be the people who aren't tough, because when it was put before the voters in polls whether you should move Yankee Stadium to the West Side, they said no, it's the polls. So you saying there's some kind of weakness for sports teams? Is it some kind of psychological scar from the Brooklyn? Well, you wrote about the Brooklyn Dodgers moving west. Is that the psychic event that the Freudians have to go back to in New York?
It's hard for me to believe that. First, because so many people had already left Brooklyn before the Dodgers left there, and if you look at the case, you know, all O'Malley wanted to do was what he did in L.A., spend his own money on a ballpark. And that model, for some reason, doesn't work here. But this is just, I think that the polls and the resistance to moving the Yankees to the West Side is based much more on the site location issue. Do we want the traffic? Do we want this, that, and the other thing? Yeah, but the idea of a Steinbrenner or the Wilpons or something like that reaching into the public treasury and having access to hundreds of millions of dollars, that doesn't create a public outcry here. And if you look at the media, this was interesting to me doing the Yankee Stadium book, even in the 70s as well as now, on the front page of every paper, on the Metro page, in the business section, the sports sections, the public was being informed about what was going on. In the 70s, we're going into bankruptcy. And Lindsay is proposing over $100 million to go to the Yankees, and there's never any traction. This doesn't connect publicly, where you get some massive political pressure will vote you out of office.
But
if you don't do
Let's
this.
talk politics.
Yeah, because
Go
here's the
ahead.
thing, 'cause it's listen, those polls show what's happening. 62% of New Yorkers don't want the stadium. But when you wrap in the Olympics, everyone wants the Olympics. There's so much confused information thrown out there to cloud this thing. It's a stadium. It's a convention center. It's an Olympic site. Oh,
It's an extension of the number 7 line.
It's going to be a flea market now, too, you know.
No, wait, no, we.
Okay, this
no,
is
wait a
the
minute.
6th Avenue Flea Market is now relocating to under the High Line on 30th Street. That one almost fell over. It's like, oh, come on. How much more little window dressing can you put on this? The bottom line is, it's still a stadium. Ronnie Lowenstein from the Independent Budget Office said to Jay Cross, does it have goalposts? And his answer was yes. It's a stadium, because it is.
Yeah.
And I think there's a realization from the public, there is wool being pulled over our eyes, but there's so many other things thrown in this, it's hard to distinguish, well, you want a convention center, you want that to expand, there's jobs there.
And
there's
you
a need for it.
don't disagree individually or institutionally with the expansion of the convention
Absolutely
center.
not, it's needed.
Right.
It's actually,
But this stadium with the retractable roof for $300 million is
Exactly.
not the way to do it.
Are
I would
private
argue.
companies going to make money off expansion of the convention center?
Sure.
Well, then doesn't the market tell you you can find private investors to do this?
I've asked the question, why, Jay Cross, why do you want to run a convention center? Why do you want to do this? It's not your business. And his answer was, well, we talked about it in the stadium. It was going to be very hard getting an open-air stadium approved, right? Because people aren't stupid, right? Why would they want to do this? Well, I've asked 2 questions. Are you going to run it, or is it going to be run by the Javits? I've got 2 different answers. We're going to run it, or the Javits is going to run it.
A lot of unknowns here.
Last week, they're going to run it. He referred to this over and over as our building,
Wow.
our events. He called it the new Madison Square Garden for the 21st century.
Yeah.
So maybe Madison Square Garden ain't too happy about that.
No,
but
the Dolans aren't very pleased.
Right.
Talk about the nature of the formal opposition to the project and the nature of the political process as we both look back and look forward to this. Give us a roadmap to what's going
Well,
on here.
we have been in this sort of getting ready for the Uniform Land Use Review Procedure.
Yeah, the famous ULURP.
The public process, right?
Right.
And that date has been a moving target. It was supposed to be certified last fall, then January, February, it keeps moving ahead. We understand clearly from talking to lots of people in city government, it's because the complexity of this project is just so out there. It's not worked out. They keep running ahead, writing things, not dotting I's, not crossing T's, and then realizing, oh, we didn't work this out. We didn't figure this out. Now,
And you're saying the Olympic timetable is driving this.
it's completely.
I'm sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
It's completely driving it. The Olympic timetable, it's a false one. This week, it's going to be announced that New York is going to be one of the 5 cities chosen. Now, that announcement is not about are we a good city or a bad city. It's capacity. Do we have the transit system? Do we have the basic infrastructure to have an Olympic event here?
Is there a 6th city? Is there a 6th? Is this a real cut?
Well, we're going to find out. It's not.
Yeah, I think there were 8 or 9. There were a number that were
You
going
know,
to
Moscow's
serious
coming
stuff.
off. Yeah.
It's like the NBA playoffs.
Yeah.
Right.
Good.
So what's going to happen next is between now and July of '05, when the final winner is announced, this has driven the entire process. I've been doing this for over 20 years. I have never seen a lack of attention paid to detail that is frightening. City planners who issue documents that are not complete. There's a document there's a boulevard as part of this Olympic plan that goes to 42nd Street. And there's a condemnation of properties.
Yeah, the whole new street.
Whole new street. On that is a 45-story residential tower just built 2 years ago. Maybe that's a mistake? Why was
You mean
it?
the street's going to go through the building?
It's on the condemnation map. I mean, it's this sort of thing that, why the rush? And the rush is the stadium must be approved by the fall. It must be approved by the fall. What had to happen? You had to pull it out of the city's jurisdiction.
Why did it have to happen by the fall?
Because they want to be able to say to the Olympic Committee by the time they submit their final
Okay.
bid book in the fall that the stadium is approved.
They probably don't want another Athens thing where you're cobbling it together, a week before the game starts.
Right, literally.
Yeah.
And it just means that to get it to happen, they have to push everything very quickly, and they have to pull it out of city review. That was the oddest thing. In the maps and the process we all saw to begin with about a year and a half ago, the stadium was clearly part of the project.
Right.
Now it's out. It's on state land. It's not subject to city review. It's not subject to elected official review or legislative review.
Okay, which is the classic strategy. Move it out of the public arena where the representative of the people can't do
Yeah,
it.
but let's
Now-
talk about hold it, Times Square. Times Square, huge project, major issue. It's condemned by the state. reviewed by the city council through the ULURP
Right,
process.
right.
Because there was an agreement that this was such a key project for our city, it had to go through public review.
And even if you're looking at it from the developer's
Go ahead.
interest, what's intriguing, I've always thought, even back when this site was being talked about for a stadium for the Yankees, so the first thing you have to do is build Westway, which you already decided you weren't going to do. So you remember when the HOK proposal came out
Right.
for this Yankee Stadium, it was like 2 inches thick or something. I remember flipping through it, and I'm looking for 2 words. I'm looking for striped bass. So the striped bass, we're not in that proposal. I don't think it's in the thinking of these developers, the significance of...
Well, there's a mini Westway now.
Yes.
As of last week, there was a park extension over the highway from 30th to 34th
Now, this is
Street.
a new element.
Brand new element, just popped out of nowhere, and it's a rolling lawn. And I might say rolling because it's at this angle, so you'll roll down it. And it literally, Jay Cross termed this as, it's our front lawn, but it's built as a public park. Now, we're going to build over the highway after all this battles back and forth to make the park more accessible, but it's going to be accessible fronted by a 30-story wall of the stadium.
Which is going to be the stadium.
Yeah.
Talk about the totality of the project, because we think of the stadium, and then there's the convention center, and then we know that there's going to be a subway expansion, but there's a whole lot more that's planned, and the various plans that have come out, there's a lot more going on. What is this thing?
Well, what's 59 square blocks? That's a huge chunk of a city. You have the convention center, not just, quote, expanding to the stadium to the south, but to the north in a major expansion, and also building a private hotel of maybe 500 rooms. You have the number 7 line, which will be the most costly extension of a subway line because it's so deep. It has to go under the Lincoln Tunnel tubes to get over there. That'll mean at some point it'll be roughly 8 or 9 stories below ground. Now, we've never had a subway like that except maybe in Washington Heights, but as for a major stop, that's an odd thing. It's so costly. There's 2 stops, one on 41st and 10th, one on 11th and 34th. The first one now is being eliminated because it's going to be $3.5 billion for
A subway stop?
for a stop, for a station. But then beyond it, it's a rezoning that brings the Central Business District west and does things that have never been done before. It creates buildings that for the first time have no limit on how big they can be, on how much bulk they can be.
Because they're out of city review process.
No.
No.
The city is mapping a brand new zone that says, if you can gather up development rights from all over, we're not
Oh,
going to
okay, I
restrict.
understand.
We're not going to, in Times Square, there was a finite area, so
Right.
much could float
Right.
around, that was it.
Right.
Here it says, you can gather up as much as you want and build as tall as you want and as large as you want. They've never done it before.
This is a big cookie jar.
Yeah, let me just fit this point on because we have the striped bass still flopping.
On the
that
table.
They need to
Hopefully
be
not
taken
flop.
care of. You can pull things out of city authority. You can create public authorities and bypass legislative process, which Maryland did to get Camden Yards. But you can do all these things. But the likelihood is groups are going to form, and they're going to go to court. They're going to go to the part of government that is supposed to be apolitical. And what you see with a lot of these major construction projects, you never really have to have a final resolution of no. You can kill the project through a judicial filibuster. The process itself can drive the costs up so much, you'll miss that Olympic deadline. Your construction costs get to a point you'll never recoup them. So I think it's vital the city have a thorough, spirited public conversation about this thing.
Okay, bouncing
Even in
off
the
that,
developer's
what's your
interest.
strategy? What is your strategy and critics' strategy? How do you, assuming your goal of stopping the stadium,
Right.
how do you do it politically?
The first thing you have to do is get people to understand what the hell is going on. Like you asked the question, it's a much bigger plan than just this stadium. It's a transformation of a huge part of the city
Right.
that's going to be lasting for the next 40 years. I think there's a beginning wake-up call on this. The next issue is money. There's a lot of New Yorkers who do not believe that we should take public money, whether it's bonded or sold, however it comes there, off the budget, on the budget, and instead of putting it towards school seats, subway seats, firehouses, to go toward a stadium. People
Right,
are
and we're
starting to
talking, let me just, 300 million from the city, 300 million from the state to build the platform over the rail yards and the retractable roof. I'm
Yeah, and
sorry,
if you
go
think
ahead.
the money's going to stay at that level.
There's a little.
Oh, well, yeah, I believe in the fairy godmother, but go ahead.
There's a little bit more. I mean, for example, 2 weeks ago we learned, in fact, that you would think the MTA for the number 7 line would do condemnation, right? That makes sense. They decided not to.
How are they going to do this?
The city will do it because the MTA doesn't want to do it. And I said, well, really, that's interesting. Well, where's the map for condemnation? Oh, we gave that to you. It's like, no, we haven't seen that map. What are you talking? Well, we're just going to hold on to the residual land from the condemnation, and we'll put that out for development. And I'm saying, wait a minute. This is the conservative revolution. So now the city's going to condemn land for a boulevard. We're going to take over a stadium site. Now we're going to condemn a bunch of other sites and put them out for office development. Why is the city in the business of doing office development? I mean, we've learned this lesson 10 times over. These are things the private market does much better. Give them the tools, let them go do their work, and shape it, you know.
Why? Why is it happening? You.
My gut is we have Olympic blindness happening here.
And the person, the chief actor here is Dan Doctorow.
It's the deputy mayor. I mean, he's a smart man. He's not a stupid man. He's done a lot of good things for the city. But when it comes to this one, he just can't see. He wants to make it happen no matter what. And he doesn't understand in the city of New York, there's nuances. There's spins on things. There's a little change. The way you get things done is you try to bring many people together as possible to understand what are the issues, what's going to happen. You have these fractious, we don't have referendums. We have not rock'em sock'em, you know, but then you come to an agreement on something, or you agree not to agree. In this case, it's either or. It's never been driven like this before.
Okay.
Well, let me add to that.
We have 30 seconds for this and one last comment.
We
Go
had the
ahead.
experiment. We've run this experiment before. This was Yankee Stadium back in the early 1970s. Why did it get done? John Lindsay wanted it to get done. Now, the money is the money, and it's significant. It's an important issue, but it's also symptomatic. Think about how many meetings are being held by public officials, how many deputy mayors, how many council people, how many staff people are spending their time on this issue instead of more compelling.
A cost that we don't often compute. We only look at the dollar cost, but there's the attention cost,
the imagination that goes into it, because people kept saying in the 70s, how do we make this work? How do we make this work? All these late night sessions on that issue, while the city went into bankruptcy and the South Bronx went to decline. Costs that could pale compared to what we face in our times.
We're rezoning the West Side, Chelsea, Clinton, huge sections of the city that will be changed forever. We're not spending the time on that. We're focusing on how do we drive this stadium through and how do we serve it. And you're right, it's a loss of imagination, because those are the things that are going to, that's what makes New York, New York, an art gallery district, a photo district, things that are integral to the city that make it unique, not this plunk down.
Subsidy for a $42 billion corporation.
Quick. Gets built, yes, no.
Gets approved, never gets built.
I agree with that.
Thank you. I learned.